Hello everyone, welcome to another React tutorial. Today we'll be seeing some concepts on React hooks. So React hooks are basically functions which are provided by the React framework, and there are a bunch of React hooks we'll be seeing today in the session. So we'll be seeing the usage of useState, which is basically to use or update the state variable of a component. So a component can have state variables, so which can be updated. When it's updated, the page will be re-rendered, and it's something called use context. Use context is something when we want to pass a value through all the child components. That value will be available through all the child components. We just need to create that context variable once in the parent component. It will be available to the all child components. Use effect is another hook which is provided by React, which is used for calling some server-side logic or to perform some side effects. It can also be used to manipulate a DOM component. Basically, this is executed in asynchronous manner. So we'll be seeing a demo of this also. And finally, useref is something which is used to maintain a fixed value. It will not be re-rendered by the React. It's kind of a constant value. And it can be also used to manipulate a DOM component. So we'll be seeing all these hooks in our sample React application. So let's create a sample React application. I'm going to use the traditional create React app. Let's name this application as demo2. So as you can see, the sample application is getting created, and all the structure on all the JS files will be created. So as you can see, it's creating all the required structure, all the JS files, and the dependencies. So as you can see, the application is getting created. So now what we can do is we can go to the new project folder in demo2 and open that folder in our Visual Studio Code. So as you can see, the structure has already been created. So here what we have to do is we can create a new folder called components, another folder called context. Now if you go to app.js, before that what we can do is we can go to our context folder and try to create a new file called app context. And the idea is to create an app context which will be used to populate or pass a value to all the child components. So let's do that. Let's name this variable as app context, and we'll call it as create context. So create context is provided by the React library, which is used for creating a context variable. So once this is done, we can go to app.js and we'll delete the existing code. Now let's try to create a context value or context variable. We'll be using this value to pass to all our child components. Now what we can do is we have to use our app context dot provider. Provider is nothing but it is used to pass this particular value to all the child components. This value will be available to all the child components. So essentially, we won't be using our props attribute. Instead of that, we're using a context value. So let's assign this to a value attribute. And let's do this. We'll be seeing this child component shortly. I'm just creating this display. Now, what we have to do is we have to create our other components. Let's do that. We'll create a bunch of components called display.js. Let's create another component called example1.js and example2.js. So now in the display component, let's create our component logic. We'll be using a state variable called text, and this is for setting the value or updating the value of the text variable. So this is basically to demonstrate the use of useState. So let's initialize this value as null. So this text is specific to this particular component. Whenever this is updated, this component will be rendered again. So let's create another variable called CLS. We'll use our useref hook and assign some value. So if you see here, this value is basically to demonstrate the use of useref hook. So this value is essentially will be independent of the state variable. This value will remain as a static value. It does not depend on the React rendering logic. So we'll see that shortly how it is used. Let's create another variable called toggle. This will be used to manipulate a DOM component using the useref hook. And let's get the value which we pass through the app context. We have to use our use context. And we have to use our app context, which we created earlier. So the value would be available in this child component. So now we can create some event handlers. Let's say we'll create some handle event. Now the idea is to manipulate the state variable. Let's say we are setting it as state example. Let's try to change it every time when we click some button. So let's do some timestamp. The idea is to display different value each time when the button is clicked. That's why we are putting a timestamp value. So let's create another variable, or sorry, event handle. We'll assign this toggle reference value. Essentially, we are updating our DOM component and assigning some text value. So all the reference value which is created through useRef will have a current attribute which is used for updating the value of the reference variable. Now we'll see usage of useEffect. Now we can assign other reference variable current to update. Basically, this is just like a static value. As I told you earlier, this particular value, since we are using a useRef hook, it is totally independent of this state variable, that is text. So we can have another parameter to this. This empty parameter states that this useEffect will be rendered only once. If you want to use the useEffect hook to run on state change or based on state variable like text, so whenever the text value is changed, the useEffect will be executed again. The page will be rendered again. So let's have it as empty. Now let's have a return script. Let's name it as useState demo. And it's trying to print the state value or state variable value. So whenever I want to display the value, I have to close in curly braces. Now we can display the current ref value also. Let's try to create some sample buttons. Type similar text. We'll try to create a text box which will actually reference the toggle variable which we created earlier. So basically what we are doing is we are binding this variable to this particular input text field. So whenever we want to update or manipulate this particular input text field, just like what we have done, we can use this ref attribute. Now let's create some buttons. Let's just click and we'll call the event handler, handle event. Let's create another button. left click, the other event handler. Within that, we can call our child component, which will be created shortly. And finally, we have to export our display component. So as you can see, this is created. Let's create our other two components. We can fetch the value of that context variable by using the use context. Let's implement our return script. We'll just display that context value. That's it. We'll be using this logic, and let's try to do an export. Default, for example. We'll try to call our other component, example 2. Let's copy this. So the logic is the same. The thing is, we're using an example 2 as the name, component name. So now we can go to example 1 and we can import example 2. Same thing for display, we can go for just making sure all the import is present. So we implement our logic. So now what we can do is I can go to the console and run this application. It's your course. And do an npm start. So looks like we have some error. Let's go to correct that one. So as you can see, this is the sample output which we get when you run the browser. So as you can see, the reference value is initialized useref, and example one context value which we have seen, which we passed from the parent component, is the same. We're getting the same value. If we click the click button, you'll see this is getting changed, and this is also getting changed. So once you click, keep on clicking it, the state variable is getting changed, but the reference value is having the same thing. So this is like a static value, so it won't get reflected or it won't be rendered. So this is the usage of useref variable. And the other thing is, if you go to left click button, you can see this is getting populated with updated, which we just saw when we are setting the value, right? We are updating our Tom component when you click on the button. So this is this is pretty much it. Just a demonstration of the important hooks which are provided by the React framework. Hope you enjoyed this session. If you happen to like this video, please do subscribe. Thank you.